Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for my first ever Facebook Live. I'm going to tell you right now, this is the first time I'm doing this, so please bear with me if we have any kinks along the way. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Amanda Augustine and I'm the career advice expert for TopResume. TopResume is the largest resume writing service in the world, so if you're thinking about changing jobs or if you're already in the thick of the job search and looking for a bit of feedback, I highly recommend checking out their site at topresume.com and requesting a free resume critique, because who doesn't like free advice, right? Free is good. And speaking of which, that's what we're here to talk about today, is get some free advice on your job search, and particularly how you can keep it going during the summer months. I know it may feel like the summer's at an end, but there's still about a month and a half left, so I want to talk about that with you guys today. Couple things to talk about before we get started. One, I'd love to give you a little background on me, just so you know what's going on. I am a certified professional career coach and resume writer. I've been in this industry for almost 15 years now, so I basically live, breathe, eat the job search. I am what you call a job search geek, and I'm proud of it. When I'm not being a job search geek, I live on Long Island with my husband and our little toddler Joshua, and then my furry son, who's about 7.5 years old, our golden retriever Marlin. So that's a little bit about me. For those of you who've already joined us, I would love to hear a little bit from you. So if you're in the sharing mood, if you could just comment below and let us know, where are you? Where are you watching this from? Where is everybody at? So feel free to shout out and let us know where you're listening from. So let's talk about what's the topic for today. And this is our very first office hours, but we're hoping to do a series of these. So we decided, why don't we start with the topic of how to heat up your summer job search? And I really like this one because we could take it a million different ways. So whether you want to talk about how do I network effectively during these summer months, or why am I not getting a response, or what could I be doing with my resume, we can cover that entire gamut of questions in this topic. So definitely, if you have some questions, you can wait till a little bit later, or feel free to post now. And when it's time for Q&A, my colleague Jenna will pull those for us and let me know what's out there that you guys want answers to. One other thing to keep in mind, well, it's not even to keep in mind. So we're talking about the job search, right? And we're talking about the summer. And I hear all the time, it's like, oh, isn't it dead during this time of year? What's the point? I'm just gonna take the summer off. I'm gonna start my job search in September. So I get a lot of questions from people saying, well, should I just wait? Is it even worth it at this point? And I'd say, yeah, most definitely. And the reason you want to start your job search now instead of September is because there's all those people out there saying, I'm just going to wait till September. So yeah, we're talking about there's going to be a bit of a slower response from hiring managers and recruiters because you're dealing with summer vacations and summer Fridays and some of that funness. But for those that are in the office and for those who are still posting jobs, you're going to be facing a lot less competition. So think of it that way. You know, when you're applying for a job, it can be so frustrating because you're up against so many applications. When it's the summertime, it's actually a little less hectic, and if there's a job that's out there and it's been posted recently, chances are you're in a better position to apply for it now than had they posted it in September or in January. And that's something to keep in mind, and I don't think anybody should be surprised by this, but when you think about job search activity in general for our industry, there are always two spikes of activity. January through February, because New Year's resolutions, everybody wants to change their job, you got your bonus from the year before or you didn't, and now you're ready to look for that new job. The other burst of activity comes in September because everybody took the summer off. A lot of your groups that you regularly attended take the summer off. Everything starts back up once the kids go back to school. So keep in mind, you want to capitalize on these 6 or so remaining weeks of summer because it's a good opportunity. Jenna, do you think I should go into some tips on optimizing your job search for the summer, or yeah?
I think that sounds great.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's talk about how do you keep your job search going when it's the summer and you really prefer to be at the beach or at a barbecue or doing something other than looking for a job. So a couple things you can do that will allow you to still enjoy your summer but keep that job search momentum. And that's something I talk about all the time. I was literally just on the phone with somebody last night and saying, hey, the important thing, whether it's 2, 5, or 10 jobs a week that you're applying to, the best thing to do is keep a consistent level of activity throughout the weeks. You don't want to have 1 week where you're crazy about jobs and you apply to 1 million, and then for 2 weeks you just kind of sit back and say, I need a break. Really the key to your job search is maintaining a consistent level of activity throughout every week. And that way you're not losing that momentum. It's very similar to a sales process. So if you're a sales manager or sales rep and you're trying to close leads and get clients and all that sort of thing, the idea is that you're always trying to maintain this pipeline of opportunities and you want to keep it active and healthy. So if you suddenly close a deal or you get a meeting with an important client, you're still going to go out and find more clients to pursue because you want to maintain that pipeline. It's very similar in the job search. You want to make sure that you're applying to jobs on a regular basis, that you are going to networking events and reaching out to people on a regular basis. Because if you suddenly think you found the right job and you got an interview and you're really excited about it, and then you kind of stop applying to jobs, it happens all the time. You're like, no, this is it. I got it. I'm on the 3rd round. This is it. Unfortunately, if that doesn't work out, and you haven't been applying to other jobs along the way, you're kind of starting back at 0. And we know how awful that can feel. So something to keep in mind. You want to keep a level amount or a consistent amount of activity on a regular basis. So how in the world do you do this when it's summer and you don't necessarily want to be doing it? Well, there are a few things that make life easier. First, you don't have to network for just stuffy trade events or your regular professional things. You get to party, but this time you're going to party with a purpose. So think about all those events that you're being invited to. Think about the beach parties, the boat trips, even like the long weekends with friends or friends of friends. You're going to a party, whatever it is. Yes, it's a social environment. Yes, you're going to be more relaxed, but guess what? You're probably meeting new people when you're going out. And that's an opportunity to network. It's going to be a different pitch. You're not going to sit there and say, well, I'm an experienced sales professional with 10 years closing deals and blah, blah, blah. No one wants to hear that, and you know that. So this is the opportunity where you take that elevator pitch that you've been working on, and now you're going to adapt it for the occasion and the audience. If you're talking to a bunch of people that know nothing about your industry, you're going to remove all that technical jargon that they're not going to get. You're going to talk about yourself in a much more relaxed way than you would, say, in an interview, right? But you're still making connections, you're still talking to new people, you're learning about them. And I gotta say, when you're looking for a job, and we did a bunch of studies on this in the past at my previous employer, but we looked at if you found your job through someone, was that one of your best friends or was it some mere acquaintance? 9 times out of 10, it was a mere acquaintance. And the one thing I'd say is think about it. You and your best friend probably run in really similar social circles. So the chances of your best friend introducing you to someone that you don't already know is a little bit more slim. But when it's a friend of a friend, they're more likely to have this network far outside of where you're used to playing, and they're the ones who can really help you identify opportunities that you might not find elsewhere. So the moral of the story is leverage these parties, leverage these fun, casual summer events, and just in the back of your head, always remember it's a networking opportunity. This is a place where I can still talk about what I'm great at and what I'm looking to do next, and find out what these people do and who they may know that might be able to help me today or maybe 6 months from now. That's one of my favorite tips. Something else to keep in mind is that you're not chained to your desk anymore when you're looking for a job. If this was 1996, yeah, most of your job search activities, particularly the online applications, would all take place when you're sitting at a desk, at home, or in an office space, and you would be locked down to a desk. Now, we all have laptops, we all have smart devices, or the vast majority of us do. You don't necessarily have to set aside a certain room to do all of your job search activities. So now, reassess all the apps you have on your phone and think about which one should I be adding in there that will help me network, that will help me identify jobs, that will help me follow up, that will help me store my resume. I mean, it's as simple as even making sure you have your email on your phone so that if a recruiter says, hey, this sounds good, send me your resume, you have your resume stored somewhere on your phone and you can email it right away. I mean, little things like that, having Google Drive or Google Docs on your phone makes such a big difference. But these are just the simple ones, right? Obviously, documents, yeah, that's good. Email, great. I think of, okay, LinkedIn. Everyone's got LinkedIn on there now. But what about the job search specific apps? And so I'd love to know, is anybody out there using any type of apps that they really like? So what kind of apps are you using that you've either heard about or you've tried out and you say, yeah, this is really helpful. I've really enjoyed using this one. I thought it was very interesting, or it's something I hadn't seen before that I found very helpful, either in networking situations or even for the job applications. I know the majority of job boards today have an app. So if you're already using their service, definitely go and see if they have an app that works for your phone, because that's a great way. I'm gonna go just check and see if anybody's been talking about any apps. Is anybody mentioning any apps, anything that they find interesting?
We have some questions, but no apps at the moment.
No apps. Okay. Well, let me tell you about a couple apps and then we can certainly go to questions. One that I came across earlier today that I hadn't heard of before was good.co. I checked that one out. It just looks interesting. It's a way to find companies and careers that it has more of that, you know, the overall good feeling in addition to just finding jobs, but these are jobs with purpose. So I thought that was kind of a cool one. I'd never heard of that one before. There was another one that came out early this spring, so I'd say take it with a grain of salt because they're probably still working through some of the kinks, but Switch came up. Check that one out. There are a lot of apps now that are trying to mimic the whole Tinder swiping deal, but on your phone for jobs, and there are a bunch out there, so I'd love for you to test them out. Consider from now till the end of August that you are being a little bit of a scientist and you're testing out some different apps to see what works for you. But the moral of the story is you don't have to be chained to a desk anymore. So remember, yes, you don't have to dedicate 4 hours at a time to work on your job search. You can check your inbox, and I recommend having an inbox just for your job search. Have an email address set up. You can create one for free on Gmail, you can create them other places, but create one email address where you do all of your networking and all of your job search activities. Why? Well, it doesn't get confused with your other stuff. You know that it's not going to have as much junk mail coming into it. You'll also know immediately when something pops up that's job search related, and it's less likely to get lost in the shuffle of your big inbox. Something else to keep in mind is that recruiters expect you to respond pretty quickly. So if you're going on vacation, still check the phone while you're waiting for your coffee or waiting in line for a ride in an amusement park or whatever it is. I would at least check in every day because they are expecting a pretty quick turnaround time. And I know how frustrating that can be because I know their turnaround time is not so quick sometimes. But unfortunately, they tend to call the shots in these situations, and so we got to play by their rules if we want to get a response. The very last thing I'd throw out there, and it's a tip that it's come out before, but I think it's worth mentioning again, is that, again, you don't have to set aside a huge chunk every day to apply to jobs, but I would recommend allotting at least a half an hour to check in on new jobs that are coming out. Because studies have shown that the chances of your application being seen plummet 72 hours after a job has been posted. Let me repeat that one more time. The job's posted online. You need to apply to that job before that job's hit its 72-hour mark online, because the chances of the recruiter seeing your application, let alone evaluating it, plummet 72 hours later. So something to keep in mind. Jenny, you said I have some questions?
You do.
Excellent.
Let's see. Let's start with Alyssa. She hates networking. It makes her so uncomfortable, but she knows that she has to do it. Do you have any tips for her?
That's a great question. So networking, you hate networking. A lot of people do hate networking. I will say, Alyssa, you're 100% correct. Networking is a really important part of the job search today. I was literally just on the phone with somebody last night, and I was talking to this gentleman, Evan, and I was like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing in your job search? He goes, I'm applying to jobs. I'm like, all right, what else? He goes, I'm applying to jobs. I'm like, all right, we got to do some more things. There's basically 3 different ways that you want to pursue job leads when you're looking for a job. The first, online applications. The second is networking. And the third is leveraging recruiters, which really this third one depends on what level you're at and if it really makes sense. But the networking component is really, really important these days. Studies have found, and I've seen more than one study state this, that you're 10 times more likely to land a job when your application is accompanied by an employee referral. 10 times more likely, not even just to get through the door, but to land the job, because it allows you to bypass those digital gatekeepers, the ATS systems. It allows you to even bypass that entry-level person that's screening your resume and probably doesn't have a good sense of who you are. But also, chances are, if somebody referred you for the job, you know them in some way, shape, or form, and they also know you and know if this job would be a good fit or the company would be a good fit for you. So you're just more likely to be a good fit for the company, in addition to being able to get past some of that initial red tape, so to speak, in the application process. So let's get back to networking, because you don't get those coveted employee referrals unless you continue to network. If you're new to the working world, your alumni associations are going to become very helpful. I would look for anybody who's whoever attended your school, particularly somebody who's doing something that you want to do, or they've done something in the past that you're really trying to get into. And if you're really nervous about networking face-to-face, you can start with more of the shooting at an email, shooting at a LinkedIn message. I consider that getting ready to network. You're not actually actively networking yet. You're just putting feelers out there and hoping to get someone to respond. It's like going to a bar and someone gives you their number and they're like, yeah, I'll call you. If you don't call the person or they don't call you, nothing happened. It didn't go anywhere. Networking is the same way. It has so much to do with the follow-up and actually building a rapport with somebody. So if there's somebody out there that you find online that you admire, and bonus points if you're somehow connected to them. It's a friend of a friend of a friend, or a friend of a parent, or a friend of a former colleague, or a current colleague, or it's somebody who was in the same fraternity or sorority as you, or attended the same school. Anytime you can find a connection like that, that's gold, because that makes it easier. If you have a shared interest, it's easier to network with those people. So the one thing I'd throw out there is just ask for, hey, do you have a piece of advice? Or, I'm looking to get into this. I've seen you've been doing this. I noticed that we're both alumni of the same university. Do you have 10 minutes for a phone call? I'd love to just, pick your brain, get some pearls of wisdom from you. Most people like talking about themselves, so this actually works well. If we're talking about those face-to-face events, and yeah, a lot of people are super nervous, well, I'd say start simple. Make a goal to attend one event. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's every other week, maybe it's for the month when you're just starting if you're really nervous. But give yourself a small goal. When you go into a networking event, make sure you have a specific goal in mind. So say that your goal is that you're going to meet 3 new people when you attend that event, or you're going to ask a question of the speaker at an event you're going to that you're really interested in. So setting up goals for yourself kind of gives you a purpose and makes you feel a little bit better about going into those situations. If you're one of those people who's kind of introverted and networking scares the bejesus out of you, other things you can do, work the edges, work the corners of an event. So chances are the people who also find networking to be super scary are standing around the edges of the event. They're not in the thick of things. So those are your friends, those are your buddies, those are the ones who are also nervous. Those are also the easiest people to approach because they're also a little scared. So just go up to them and be like, hey, like, you know, what made you decide to go to this? They're like, oh, networking always makes me so nervous. What about you? You want to buddy up? Something like that just makes it easier. Also, keep in mind, networking is like any type, it's like a first date. You want to ask more questions than, you want to listen more than you talk. So ask questions, respond to theirs, but make sure that you're listening more than you're speaking. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, you know, abide by that ratio. Something else I'd recommend if you're kind of nervous about the whole networking scene is when you attend an event, look for the super confident person who you know is the social butterfly. You always know who those people are. They tend to be a little bit louder, they're standing a little straighter, they have some people around them, they're very energized, they're talking, they're doing their thing, and you look at them and go, oh God, that's not me. Your goal for that networking event is to observe that person and then try and copy some of their mannerisms. Pay attention to their eye contact, their mannerisms, their hand motions, what is their posture like, what's the volume of their voice, how quickly or slowly are they speaking. Look for those few things and then just try and mimic them. And again, it's gonna feel weird, but networking, like anything else, is a muscle that you have to practice and work if you wanna get better at it. So nobody's a born perfect networker, nobody's a perfect born negotiator. Those types of skills will build if you keep practicing them. So keep that in mind. And the other great thing about the summer is that you don't have to go to formal events. Your networking could be, you go to a cool meetup for singles that do, you know, outdoor activities and you want to go to that, or you pick something that you love to do already and find a group that does that, and you network with the people who love to garden or love to do you know, love to go to sporting events. Whatever it is, that makes it easier. Just remember that you don't have to go to some formal trade event in order to network. Look for the fun opportunities. Think about who in your personal circle of friends is the social butterfly. Almost everyone's got, you know, that person who knows everyone, is the one who's introducing you to all new people. That's the one you want to hitch your wagon to. Find out what they're doing. Find out what their plans are for the summer. What are they doing at night? What are they doing on the weekends? And join in. See how many of those things you can attend, because chances are you're going to meet new people, and it's going to be a much more casual, less intimidating place to practice your networking skills. Yes?
So, speaking of nerves, we have a great question from Waleed. He gets really nervous during interviews. What's the best way to cool down?
Great question, Waleed. And hi, I think we've talked before on Facebook. So, couple things. If you're really nervous about an interview, the one thing I will say is the more you prep ahead, the less nervous you're gonna be. When you feel confident about your answers, you've done your research, you've practiced how you're gonna respond to things, you know what questions you're gonna ask them, that is half the battle. So really you wanna make sure preparation's key here. Make sure you've taken care of those things. There are also, think about the things that you know are going to trigger the nerves, even just getting there, the commute, those sort of things. If you have the time, if the interview is far enough in advance, say it's a week later, I know that's often unrealistic, so even if it's a couple of days in the, down the line, if you have the ability, do a dress rehearsal. go and commute or drive to wherever the interview is going to take place just to see how long it's going to take you to get there. What's traffic like during that time of day? This way you can give yourself enough time. You can find out about what's going on with construction or train changes or anything like that. So again, you can plan ahead, because the more you feel prepared, the less nervous you're going to be. Some other things to keep in mind: if you're a caffeine consumer, as I am, you want to cut it in half. So whether it's a tea or a coffee or a soda early in the morning, however much you normally drink in the morning, you want to cut that in half. That will keep some of those jitters at bay, because you're already going to be amped up. You don't really need to add extra caffeine to that fire. Something else you might want to try is eating foods that are known as natural beta blockers. So that includes bananas, almonds. Those were my two go-tos, so those are the ones I always think of. But if you Google foods that are natural beta blockers, you will find a bunch out there. These actually tend to keep you calm. So that's something to keep in mind. A few other things. Always arrive a little bit earlier than you really think is necessary. So if you want to get to the office 15 minutes ahead of time, or 15 minutes ahead of when they told you to show up, but give yourself extra time and just make sure you've done your research and you know if there's a coffee shop nearby or a place that you can duck in where you can just kind of sit, hang out, collect your thoughts, because you don't want to be rushing into the interview. That's just going to get you off on the wrong foot. You want to start with the right energy. Something else, keep your mannerisms in your hands, just keep them in check. So this is where a lot of people's nerves show up. They start twiddling with their hair, they start biting the cap of the pen they're holding, they're playing with their hands, they're playing with thumbs, they shove their hands in their pockets. These are all things you want to try and avoid at all costs. So something that I was taught a long time ago is that if you have something small to hold in your hand, a quarter, a rabbit's foot, some sort of talisman, they normally say, something that will keep your hand held into your side, that normally helps, because you don't want to shove your hands in your pockets. But if there's something small that you can hold in one of your hands and kind of keep underneath the table, that might help you. You can sit there and play with that under the table without anyone seeing it, and that will keep you from all the little nervous jitters that will drive your interview crazy, or your interviewer crazy. Keep in mind, you don't want them focusing on those little things. You want them focusing on what you're saying and what you're able to tell them about yourself. Let me think. There are a couple others I know that normally come up that I've always found helpful. You got to figure out what works best for you. And I know that's kind of a lame answer because it's not one specific thing to do, but everyone's a little different. So what do you do when you're stressed out? Job search aside. Do you meditate, or do you run? Do you enjoy banging a drum as hard as you can to get out the energy? Whatever it is, figure out what that stress relief is and make sure you do it either the morning before the interview or the night before, so that your energy is more balanced. That's always one that I found to be very useful. I'm very different if I don't, go for that little run or sit down and meditate for a couple minutes. Just kidding, I don't meditate. I know I'm supposed to, but I don't. It's not going to happen. However, everyone says it's good, so kudos to those who do it. In terms of other things from a nerves perspective, I think the best is just to have a checklist. Make sure you've gone through everything, because if you can sit there and say, I've done everything I can do for an interview and I'm as prepared as I can be, then that's it. And that's what you're going in with. In terms of trying to think if there's anything else that's usually worked for me. I really think if you haven't interviewed in a while, or if you have and something's not working, try doing a mock interview with a friend. Or there are plenty of services out there, TopResume included, where you can, purchase an interview prep session in addition to having your resume done. So find a place where you can either record yourself. I think that's really important. If you're going to practice interviewing with a friend or even with your dog, make sure you can record it on your phone or with your computer, because you want to look back and see what are you doing and understand where are those nervous tics. But it's also going to help you just figure out where are you getting stuck, and then you need to work on those things. But I think that's a pretty good, a pretty good thing. Also, definitely, and for those who are joining, hi, I'm Amanda Augustine, career advice expert for TopResume, and today we're talking about how to maximize your job search before the summer ends. If you're in the market for a new job or you're thinking about it, I highly recommend heading over to topresume.com where you can get a free review of your resume. But the thing I wanted to mention to you, Waleed, is if you go there and you click on career advice, you can also check out our interview advice section, and I know there's a few articles on there that specifically talk about how do you keep yourself calm, how do you keep the jitters at bay.
We have a great question from Jeff. Aside from his resume, are there any other documents that he should have in his job search portfolio?
That's a very good question. Sorry guys, needed a sip. All right, yes, back in the day, resume, cover letter, right? That's all you needed for a job search. Today, it's a little different. If you want to land the job and get the attention that you deserve from the right recruiters, you have to be a triple threat. And that means making sure that you are consistently advertising your brand, your value to an employer online, on paper, and face-to-face. So there are a few things that are considered part of the prep stage of the job search. Normally, I break the job search down into 3 main stages. There's prep, search, and close. And prep is where you're building your advertising campaign. When you're a job seeker, you automatically become a marketer, and a big part of your job is figuring out how to market the most important product or service you will ever market in your entire life, and that's you, your value, your candidacy. So that's building all the documents you need in order to promote yourself to employers. The middle section, which is called search, that's when you're pursuing job leads. So that's the online job applications. That's networking with both personal and professional contacts. And that's also leveraging recruiters appropriately. And then your close phase, that's your your interviews, your interview follow-up, the negotiation process, and I would even say the first 90 days of your new job, so that onboarding period, because the first 90 days of any new job is an extension of the interview process. You're still feeling them out, they're still feeling you out, so it's still that time when there's a little bit of an assessment going on. So let's jump back into prep, because that's really what Jeff's asking about. When you are building your arsenal of job search tools, there are a number of things you want to create, clean up, manage, reevaluate before you go out on a full-blown job search. One is figure out what your job goals are. You need a goal. But once you've figured out that goal, you need to figure out how to promote your qualifications for that opportunity. That includes your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, which is very vital these days for almost every industry out there now. Your online presence, which is beyond just a LinkedIn profile. If someone Googles your name, what in the world pops up about you? What can you get rid of? Or if there's nothing popping up about you, what can you add so that when an employer Googles your name, and we know that over 90% of them are going to do so before deciding to invite you in for an interview, they're going to find something that that's in alignment and with your resume and supports your overall job goals and your career search. In addition to your online presence, it's also your elevator pitch. So how are you selling yourself to people? And I will say elevator pitch is the worst word or the worst term in the entire world, because who really sits in an elevator and gives their pitch? I'm gonna say it doesn't happen as often as one would think. But it is this idea of, can you succinctly explain what you're great at, what you're passionate about, and why does this make you qualified for a specific job in that 30 to 45 second time frame. So those are all the main pieces. Oh, I'd say the very last one is also references. Building up at least normally 3 to 5 references of people who worked with you, for you, or above you that you could call on where and when necessary. Those are the major components. Luckily, I will say, if you're struggling with any of those, if you're struggling with the resume, the cover letter, the thank you note after an interview, if you're struggling with your LinkedIn profile, TopResume can help you with a number of those. So definitely check out their website and see if, maybe it's time to have a professional help you out. Why spin your wheels? The one thing I will say is that writing a resume is hard. I mean, I'm a professional resume writer, and I'd never write my resume in a million years. Why? It's really hard to be objective about your own career. It's really hard to say, I should not include that on my resume because even though I'm really, really proud of it, it's too far in the past and recruiters don't care, or it doesn't actually support my current job goal. So it may have been great, but no one who's reading this that I want to talk to is gonna care. That's really hard to do on your own. Second, even if you're a great writer, resume writing is a different beast altogether because you have to know all these rules about how technology is scanning that document and ranking it and then passing it along. And so many times when you apply to jobs and you're not hearing back, it's actually because no one ever saw your application, because you had to upload it somewhere and a piece of software known as an applicant tracking system scanned it, ranked it, and it didn't hit a high enough ranking to ever be passed on to a human being. So something to keep in mind. It's there's no reason why any regular average Joe non-job search geek would ever have to know all these rules, and why in the world would you ever want to learn them? So it makes sense. Why not at least get them to critique your resume to get a sense of how you're faring?
So we have a multi-part question from Doug.
All right.
Initially asked if he should put his picture on his resume.
Okay.
One of our viewers chimed in with no, but Doug feels like his face is a part of his personal brand.
Okay.
So if he wanted to work for them and they had a bias against him, including his picture, he's not sure he would want to work for them. Got you.
All right, couple things to keep in mind, Doug. Normally, if you are working in the U.S., looking for a job in the U.S., and you have a resume, and you are not in show business, so you're not a spokesperson, an actor, aspiring or any of those things, putting your picture on your resume is a big no-no. It's just considered something you don't do. I get what you're saying that, well, if they don't want to look at me, then I don't, it's not the right company for me. What I will say is so many, and I've talked to a lot of recruiters about this, they're so concerned about being accused of some sort of discrimination that oftentimes any resumes that have pictures on them, they automatically reject because they don't want to have any cause for being told that they were being discriminatory. So they won't even interview those people, or they won't even consider those folks because they have a picture on their resume. There's actually, and I don't know if it's the same now, but it was definitely a feature that was pretty prominent not that long ago, but LinkedIn's recruiter package, the really expensive kind of like the primo version of LinkedIn for recruiters, there was actually an option to say, take away their names and their pictures, so that when they were reviewing people on LinkedIn as part of this application vetting process, that they couldn't see your gender or know what you looked like, because they were so concerned about potentially being accused of discrimination of any sort. And I know that sounds really extreme, but it's the reality. The one thing I would say is that you may be a very handsome gentleman, but your face shouldn't be what's telling your story. You want to pitch what you've accomplished, what value you bring to the organization. It's not just, are you a pretty face? And the one thing I would say is that you should have your URL to your LinkedIn profile at the very top of your resume. Or if you're in a creative field, you should, in addition, have the link to your portfolio. And those are other mediums where it's much more acceptable to incorporate your headshot on the LinkedIn profile, and on your own personal website, on the contact section or the About Me section. It's very common to have a picture of yourself. And that's a spot where recruiters expect to see something like that. It's not considered jarring, and it's more in alignment with what they're expecting to see. So I would try, hey, if you're really stuck on it, go ahead, try both ways, but I would highly, highly, highly recommend taking it off your resume. A resume is a more cut and dry, black and white kind of document. And what that resume's purpose is to get you that first phone call, to get this conversation started. Let your personality shine on the summary of your LinkedIn profile, in your conversations. Let the resume focus on, this is all I've done, this is what I'm capable of doing, this is the value I could bring to your organization. Don't you want to hire me?
Great answer, Amanda. So Isabel asks, she's applying to jobs, but she's not hearing back. She doesn't know what she should do. Do you have any suggestions?
Sure. I hear this a lot, and it's so challenging and so frustrating if you're applying to jobs and you're just not hearing back. I've spoken with 2 people in the last 2 days who reached out to me specifically for that reason. And they're, without seeing your resume, without knowing the in and outs of your job search and your career goals, of course, there could be a lot of factors at play that I'm not aware of. Let's start with some of the most obvious stuff. If your resume is not positioned for the job you're going after, you're going to be in trouble. A resume should not just be a laundry list of everything you can and could and have done. It shouldn't be a list of ingredients, basically. It should be a pretty little blurb on a menu about a certain meal. Think of it as it's a piece of marketing. So there are 2 things that are here. One, you want to make sure that if someone quickly glances at it, they completely understand what job you're applying for and why you're qualified for that role. So if your qualifications are not obvious, you need to go back and make sure they are. And the best way to do that is to talk to a friend, somebody who doesn't really have a good understanding of what you do or what you're looking for. Do the friend test. Give them your resume for, let's say, no more than 60 seconds. And just so you guys know, the average recruiter is only scanning a resume for 6 seconds. So we're going to give your friend 10 times that amount of time to quickly look at your resume. And then take it away and say, okay, what job do you think I'm applying for? And why do you think I'm qualified for that job? If somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs of what you do is unable to give you an answer, that means that your resume needs some work. So that's the human element. The other part is you have to remember that many, many companies are using a piece of software in order to collect, store, parse, and read your resume. And that's known as an applicant tracking system. And there's a number of them out there. Anytime they make you create a login, upload your resume, confirm certain pieces of information, you know you're in some sort of applicant tracking system. We also call it ATS for short because it's long. And if your resume doesn't contain the right keywords in order to say, I'm a good fit for this job, you're never being seen by the human in the first place. So what I recommend doing is printing out a few job descriptions of jobs that you feel very confident that you're qualified for and that you're interested in. And they don't even have to be the ones you're applying for at the moment. They could be something you applied to a couple weeks ago, but it's still the type of job you want. Or you could find a few jobs that are in other parts of the country that you're really not going to apply for, but they really describe exactly what you want to do. Print those out and then look through them and see what words are continuously popping up on all of these. What are the most common keywords in terms of qualifications, responsibilities, anything that's considered something they want you to possess before you enter the job, or they describe what you would be doing in the position. Look for those little blurbs. It's not just a word, sometimes it's a phrase. Highlight all of those. And if you can put a check mark next to it and say, yeah, I've done that, or yeah, I've got that. You want to take that language, and I mean that specific wording, and work it into your resume. So it may be how you describe a responsibility you held at a former job. It could be a keyword that you're adding to the core competencies or areas of expertise section at the top of your resume that kind of gives an overall look at your skills. It might be in the technical proficiencies at the bottom of your resume that talk about the tools that you know how to use and that you've leveraged in other roles. Or it could be even in that professional summary at the top that's describing, the very brief, this is why I'm qualified to do this type of work. But the more of those terms that you can incorporate in, the more likely you are to get past those initial screens, those initial gatekeepers that are keeping you and your application from being introduced to someone who has a better understanding of what you do for a living. Just think of this, you need to idiot-proof your resume. You don't know who's reading it, you don't know what they know about the actual role, so you have to be able to very clearly spell out everything. So if you have a certification that's considered really important for your career and it's really vital to the role you want to do, don't just add it in the education spot at the bottom of your resume, put the acronym for that certification after your name at the very top. Why? You want to make sure they see it twice. If being bilingual is considered a great advantage in the types of roles you're pursuing, in general, everyone likes somebody who's bilingual, so I highly recommend, in general, you want to put that on. At the bottom of your resume, you're putting languages, but at the top of your resume, at the end of your professional summary, you're also putting bilingual, multilingual, whatever it is, and putting the names of the languages you speak. It's just another way to put you ahead of others. So that's one thing, make sure the resume's right. Second, make sure you're applying to the jobs as soon as they come out. So something I mentioned earlier was this concept of, staying fresh with the jobs. So set up job alerts, check your job boards, set up things with apps so you get notifications when a role that meets your needs pops up, because you want to apply to it within those first 72 hours that it's gone online. That way you're much more likely to have your application reviewed in the first place. Some of the other things that may be hurting you or playing against you when you're trying to apply to jobs and you're not hearing back, here are some number of the red flags that recruiters look for. Typos, grammatical errors on the resume. You used a really standard cover letter, and yeah, 50% or so of recruiters still like to read a cover letter. So include one because you don't know who you're dealing with. Where you mentioned Apple, but you were applying to Dell. Or you mentioned, Pepsi, but you were applying to Coca-Cola. So definitely proofread. If you are applying to a job across the country, oftentimes local candidates are favored and will be prioritized above. So if you have, an address locally for that area, you might want to put that down, or just make sure you're removing the city, state, the whole location information from the top of your resume. Also, if it's very obvious that you're living across the country, you may want to include in your cover letter, in your profile, on your LinkedIn profile, and on your resume that you're interested in relocating to X location, at your own expense. Again, just another way to make sure they know, yeah, I'm serious about this. Other red flags, job hopping, long periods of unemployment. These are all those areas where it's like, well, what do I do? It is what it is. This is where a resume writer can help you, because there is no one solution. I can't tell you, this is what you do and this fixes it all. It's, okay, what do you have to work with, and how can we weave the story in a way that we position the information the best way possible? At TopResume, we always say, everyone's got a story to tell. Our job is to help you tell the best version of that story. And that's when working with an expert can really help, because if you just put it plain on paper, the stats, sometimes you're just not going to stack up when you have some of those things counted against you. The other thing I'd say is, you're not hearing back from applications, make sure you truly are qualified. And I know that should seem obvious, but a lot of people are like, well, maybe they want 3 to 5 years and I have 1.5. It's no, you're competing against a lot of people. Look at what are the core must-haves for the job. There's desired things, and then there's required. And yes, sometimes recruiters, their job descriptions are like the wish list of everything you could possibly have. We call it, they're looking for the purple squirrel, this thing that probably doesn't exist. So your job is to look at that job description and say, okay, what are they saying is required? What seems to be repeated over and over and over again? Okay, that's really what they need. All these other things are nice to haves. You have to have those core requirements. Don't apply to jobs where you don't. You're wasting your time and theirs. And the other thing I'd say is leverage your network. You're 10 times more likely to land the job when that application is accompanied by an employee referral. Whether that's a friend passing your resume directly on to the recruiter responsible for the role or the hiring manager, or it's a big enough system where they're actually saying, hey, do you know anyone at our company? And you're listing that for them.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Bobby asks, he was at a position for a few months, but it wasn't a good fit and he had a negative experience.
Okay.
He doesn't want to include this experience on his resume, but it creates an employment gap, and this gap always comes up in interviews. How should he address that?
I find it funny that if it's only a few months that they're coming up with this gap. So there's a couple different ways to handle it. Of course, there's never one perfect answer. I would test it both ways. You can put it on, and it's a short period of time, and the ways that you stay above the fray, and you say, you know what? I started there. I learned very quickly that it just wasn't the right company for me. We just didn't see. You can either go really vague and just say, you know, I realized it just wasn't the right cultural fit for me. And what I would say about that is then say, what I learned from that experience is I'm really looking for an organization that focuses on XYZ or works in XYZ or believes in ABC, whatever that is. And of course, it should be whoever you're talking to now. So what about that role was awful? And instead of focusing on why it was so horrible, focus on what you learned from it and just spin it. Yes, I worked there, you know, I was excited about the role, but I realized it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So it could be that they told you the role was this, and it turned out the role they expected you to do was very different. It could be that the culture, there was something about the culture where it was either like everyone was very siloed and no one talked, and you're looking for a more collaborative environment. These are all things that you could easily spin instead of saying, my boss was absolutely awful and I wanted to shoot myself every day, you know? There are other ways to talk about it. So I would pick one of those angles, but pick something where you can say, what I learned is the next company I work for, I want to make sure that the role is allowing me to leverage these types of skills. Or I've learned that I work much better in an organization that's more collaborative in nature, or you know, something, or it really keeps open lines of communication. Whatever it is, you just want to make sure that the company you're with whom you're interviewing is known for those sorts of things, or the role that you're applying for is more straight up the function. And if they're not, you might as well know now. So that's one way to handle it. The other way is, yes, you can remove it. It depends on where the gap exists. So you don't necessarily have to include months and years on your resume. So if you just put years, does it appear to be a gap? You might be able just to remove it that way. There are different ways to format the dates of employment so that the gap may not show depending on when you worked with them. I would test both out though. I would see if there's a way to format it, so maybe you can remove it all together. And if you can't do that, say it just doesn't look good. I mean, but normally you can. If it was only a few months, even if, you know, the job ended December 2015 and started, and you didn't get another job till spring of 2017, if you just have 16 and 17, they don't know that there was a huge gap there. They may pick at it a little bit, and then you may have to explain, I actually did have a job in between those two positions, but I learned blah, blah, blah. Or you can try putting it in and see if that fares better. You just have to have your story ready. So that's why I say with everybody, you've got a story to tell. You just got to figure out what's the right way to explain it, where there's something positive that comes out of it, where I can talk about how I gained a skill, I learned something new, I further clarified my job goals, I have a much better idea of what I want to be doing now, aka I'm going to be a very loyal, hardworking, passionate employee for your organization because I have a better understanding of what I'm great at and what I want to be doing.
I spoke too soon. We actually do have time for another question. Susanna asks, how do I make the transition from teaching to the corporate world?
That's a very good question. Susanna, I wish I could go back and forth with you right now because I'm curious as to what you want to do outside of teaching. So anybody who's ever looking to do a career change of any sort, this is what I'd recommend that you do. Now, normally I'd say go to LinkedIn and run an advanced search. they changed their system. I'm not happy about it. But it's a little more challenging, but you can still get at it. It just takes a little bit more work. If you can run a search to find people who previously worked as teachers, so you want to say previous title or previous company, you know, put the word school in it, or teacher or something like that, search those people. It can be first, second, third connections. You don't have to have any connection to them, but then run down and look who is no longer in a role that's teaching. That's a really great way to start. Look and see who has, and this works also if you just want to change industries and you're not too sure what industries would accept your experience. If you run a search for people who previously worked for the same company, or previously worked with the same type of job title, or you know, any of these things, and then look to see who currently isn't in that field anymore, who's doing something different. This will help you see what are the other career paths that I could explore where I know that my experience is accepted because other people have been doing it. Not to mention, if you have first or second connections with any of these people, or you don't and you just want to do the blind in-mail, you can always reach out and say, I noticed you made this switch. I'm looking to do something similar and I really just don't know where to start. I would love to, normally you can go and say, I'd love to buy you a drink, grab a cup of coffee with you. I'd love to pick your brain. Would you mind doing that? If you think that's too much of an ask, you can always do the 10 minutes on the phone. Because even a 15-minute coffee turns into an hour and a half. By the time you get there, you meet up, you get your coffee, you talk. So if you think that's too much of a time restraint, then go for the quick call. The one other thing I would say about job searching or even professional development during the summertime is that you can capitalize on summer Fridays. A lot of people have lighter workloads in general because there's so many vacations going on, so everything kind of slows down unless your industry really does heat up during this time of year, so that people are more likely to leave a little early or take a little longer lunch break. You have those opportunities, but also there are lots of industries where summer Fridays are still an industry standard and they get those sorts of things. So that might be the perfect opportunity to try and meet up with somebody. So look for those opportunities. The other thing I'd recommend is that your network's going to become incredibly important, because when you're making a change, your resume is never going to be a carbon copy perfect fit for whatever role you're going after, because you're making a change. You're not going from assistant teacher to teacher, or teacher to even principal or anything like that. You're trying to branch into something different. So the type of previous experience they're looking for, chances are you don't necessarily have that. What I would think about is, what do you know really well? You know the education system really well. What target audience do you know well? Well, you know how to deal with parents. You know some sort of age range of children, and you have a really good sense of how they act, behave, what they like, what they don't like. I would use those as, these are part of your selling points. These are the things that you're going to want to play up on your resume. So you're looking for jobs or career paths where they're going to value your knowledge of the industry. They're going to value your knowledge of that target audience. So is it, you know, educational publishing? It could be a whole line of different things. But that's what I'd explore, is look for those different opportunities, and then when you find somebody who's doing what you think you're interested in, conduct informational interviews. And this is you interviewing someone else, where it's, hey, and this is more than that little 10-minute call. The 10-minute call is like warm them up, start creating a relationship before you ask for anything else. But when you do sit down for that informational interview, it's asking, you know, how did you get there? What have you done? When you look at my resume, or after I've explained a little bit more about me and what I've done and what I know, are there any noticeable gaps in my experience or skill set that you think are going to be an issue for me? So then you can start looking for classes to fill those gaps, or internships to fill those gaps, or other volunteer opportunities to help fill those gaps, or that sort of thing. They'll also probably clue you into what professional associations should you be following, what thought leaders on social media should you be following and engaging with, what events would make sense for you to attend. So again, all this information will help make you a better candidate for the role that you ultimately want to go into.
I think we're good, yeah.
Well guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being patient. This is definitely my first time doing this, and I hope to do this again. The one thing I would ask, if you guys are still on, is in the comments section, put what would you want topics to be in the future? Do you want one just on resumes? Do you want one just on interviewing? Just on salary negotiation? Just on figuring out what the heck to do with your online brand? Or is social media necessary? Whatever you really want the next one to be about, please put it in the comments below so we can take that into account when we're planning the next one of these. Again, I'm Amanda Augustine, career advice expert for TopResume, the largest resume writing service in the world. I recommend checking us out at topresume.com to receive a free resume review and also to take advantage of all of our free advice on our blog. Thanks again. See you soon.